The power of standing alone begins by acknowledging a truth that many chosen ones recognize deeply within their own life journey. The path they walk is often a solitary one. While society tends to celebrate teamwork, alliances, and belonging to groups, the chosen one frequently finds themselves moving through life without relying heavily on those structures. This does not mean they reject connection or community, but their direction is guided more by inner clarity than by external approval. Many people build their decisions around validation from others, constantly checking whether their actions fit within the expectations of the group. The chosen one, however, often feels compelled to follow a quieter inner compass, even when that direction leads them away from the crowd. Because of this, their journey can appear unusual to those who measure strength through numbers and alliances rather than self-trust and independence. As this independence becomes more visible, it can confuse or intimidate people who are accustomed to controlling social dynamics. In many environments, influence is maintained through subtle networks of loyalty, gossip, or shared narratives that encourage everyone to stay within certain boundaries. When someone operates outside of those invisible systems, it disrupts the normal patterns of control that people rely on to predict behavior. The chosen one may simply be focused on their own growth and purpose, yet their independence unintentionally exposes how much others depend on social pressure to maintain influence. People who cannot manipulate the chosen one begin feeling uneasy because they cannot predict their actions, reactions, or decisions. Without emotional leverage, the usual tactics of approval, criticism, or group pressure lose their effectiveness. This uncertainty creates tension among those who prefer stability through control. The introduction, therefore, reveals the deeper message behind this experience. The chosen one's ability to operate alone is not weakness or isolation, but a form of strength that unsettles those who depend on influence over others. Their independence becomes a mirror, reflecting the insecurities within systems built on conformity and manipulation. What others interpret as distance or unpredictability is actually the result of self-trust and clarity. As the story unfolds, the central idea becomes clear. The chosen one's independence does more than protect their personal path. It quietly exposes the fragile nature of environments that rely on control, gossip, and pressure. And it is precisely this freedom that creates fear and paranoia among those who hoped the chosen one would remain easy to influence. Why the chosen one walks a different path begins with understanding that the independence many chosen ones carry did not appear overnight. It was formed slowly through experiences that taught them the difference between surface-level acceptance and genuine alignment with truth. The chosen one often develops independence early in life, sometimes long before they realize how unusual it is. There may have been moments when they tried to fit into environments where everyone followed the same expectations, shared the same assumptions, and avoided questioning what seemed normal. Yet, even in those early stages, something within the chosen one sensed that their path required a deeper level of awareness. While others were comfortable moving with the crowd, the chosen one felt an inner pull toward authenticity, even if that meant standing apart from the majority. Over time, experiences of betrayal, misunderstanding, or isolation begin shaping that independence into something stronger and more deliberate. Situations may arise where trust is broken, or where the chosen one realizes that loyalty within certain groups depends more on convenience than on truth.
These moments can be painful, especially when they involve people the chosen one once believed were allies.
Yet within that pain lies a powerful lesson. The realization that relying entirely on external validation can leave a person vulnerable to manipulation or disappointment. Instead of becoming bitter or withdrawn, many chosen ones gradually learn to rely on their own inner clarity. They begin recognizing that strength does not come from how many people stand beside them, but from how firmly they remain aligned with their own integrity. This realization changes the way the chosen one approaches relationships and decisions. Rather than constantly adjusting their behavior to maintain approval, they become more comfortable listening to their own discernment. Independence becomes less about separation from others and more about maintaining clarity, even when others disagree. This shift often surprises those around them. People who once expected the chosen one to follow familiar social patterns begin noticing that they now move with quiet confidence that does not depend on consensus. The chosen one is no longer easily swayed by popularity or pressure, because their decisions are guided by deeper reflection rather than immediate approval. Walking alone, therefore, becomes a form of personal clarity rather than a sign of isolation. When the chosen one steps away from environments that require constant compromise of their values, they gain the freedom to observe situations more objectively. They begin seeing patterns that may not be visible to those still immersed in group dynamics. Conversations reveal hidden motives, alliances expose subtle power structures, and behaviors that once seemed harmless begin revealing deeper intentions. This awareness strengthens the chosen one's independence because it confirms that following their own path allows them to maintain perspective and honesty.
What once looked like separation from the group becomes a vantage point from which truth becomes easier to recognize.
At times, this path can still feel challenging because humans naturally desire connection and understanding. The chosen one may occasionally wonder whether life would be easier if they simply blended in and avoided standing apart. Yet, each time they consider that possibility, they remember the lessons learned through past experiences. They understand that true belonging cannot exist where authenticity must be sacrificed. Instead, they learn to appreciate the quiet strength that comes from self-trust. Independence does not mean rejecting connection entirely. It means forming relationships that are based on mutual respect rather than expectation or control. As this understanding grows, the chosen one becomes increasingly comfortable navigating life without needing constant reassurance. Decisions are made with intention rather than urgency, and relationships are approached with discernment rather than blind trust. The path they walk may look different from the one most people follow, but it is guided by a sense of purpose that cannot be easily shaken by external pressure. This independence also creates a unique type of stability. When challenges arise, the chosen one does not immediately look outward for approval or direction. Instead, they pause, reflect, and listen to the inner clarity they have developed over time. That ability to remain centered during uncertainty becomes one of their greatest strengths. Others may rush to protect their reputation or defend their position within the group, but the chosen one understands that true security comes from alignment with truth rather than popularity. In this way, the path they walk becomes not just a personal journey, but a demonstration of what it means to live with integrity. Their independence reminds others that it is possible to remain authentic, even in environments that reward conformity. The chosen one may not always receive immediate recognition for this strength, but over time, people begin noticing the stability and clarity that accompany their presence. Walking a different path, therefore, becomes more than an individual choice. It becomes a quiet example of courage and self-awareness. The chosen one does not walk alone because they reject others, but because their journey requires the freedom to move without being controlled by expectations that do not align with their purpose. Independence disrupts group control. Begins with a truth that many people rarely acknowledge openly. Most social environments operate through invisible systems of influence. These systems are not always obvious, and they are rarely announced as rules, yet they shape how people behave, speak, and make decisions within a group. Approval, loyalty, shared opinions, and subtle expectations become the threads that hold these systems together. Within such environments, people often learn that belonging depends on staying within certain boundaries. Opinions must align with the group's dominant narrative. Behavior must reflect what others consider acceptable, and questioning the direction of the collective can quickly attract attention. These patterns may appear harmless on the surface, but they create structures where influence quietly flows through alliances, approval, and unspoken agreements. When someone understands these patterns, they realize that control within groups rarely appears as direct commands. Instead, it moves through pressure to conform and fear of standing apart. The chosen one's independence quietly disrupts these systems because it removes the foundation that group control depends on. When a person is comfortable walking their path without constantly seeking validation from others, the usual methods of influence begin losing their effectiveness. Many group dynamics rely on subtle leverage.
Praise may be used to reward those who cooperate.
Criticism may discourage those who question authority. And rumors can reshape reputations when someone resists the expected role. These mechanisms work effectively when individuals depend on the group for identity, approval, or emotional security. Yet, when the chosen one becomes internally grounded, these strategies begin encountering resistance they were never designed to handle. The chosen one does not react in predictable ways. Praise does not easily persuade them to compromise their values, and criticism does not automatically push them into compliance. This unpredictability unsettles people who are accustomed to controlling social environments. The chosen one may not even realize they are disrupting anything. They are simply living according to their own clarity and boundaries. Yet, from the perspective of those invested in maintaining group influence, the chosen one appears difficult to categorize. They do not compete for attention within the group hierarchy, nor do they rely on alliances to protect their position. This independence creates a type of freedom that quietly exposes how much effort others invest in maintaining their place within the social structure. For those who depend on these systems of influence, the chosen one's behavior raises uncomfortable questions. If someone can function confidently without the approval of the group, it suggests that the group's power may not be as absolute as it once seemed. That realization can create tension because it challenges assumptions that many people have relied on for stability. Rather than reflecting on these assumptions directly, some individuals attempt to restore the old balance by drawing the chosen one back into the group's influence. They may attempt to persuade, pressure, or even subtly isolate the chosen one in hopes that independence will fade and conformity will return. Yet the more the chosen one remains grounded in their own direction, the more obvious the contrast becomes between genuine independence and the influence-based dynamics surrounding them. Over time, others begin noticing this difference as well. Some individuals within the group may quietly admire the chosen one's freedom, even if they are not yet ready to express that admiration openly. They recognize that living without constant dependence on approval requires courage and clarity. For others, however, the chosen one's independence feels threatening because it undermines the structure they rely on to maintain influence. When someone cannot be easily influenced through praise or criticism, the usual pathways of control disappear. This situation forces those who seek control to confront a reality they would prefer to avoid. Not everyone can be guided by the same pressures that shape group behavior. The chosen one's independence therefore becomes more than a personal characteristic. It becomes a mirror reflecting the hidden mechanisms within social environments. By simply choosing to move with integrity rather than conformity, the chosen one reveals how much power within groups depends on subtle manipulation rather than genuine respect. This revelation can create discomfort, but it also creates an opportunity for growth. Some members of the community may begin questioning whether the systems they once followed truly support authenticity and personal responsibility. In this way, the Chosen One's independence becomes a catalyst for awareness that extends beyond their own life. What began as a personal decision to trust their own path gradually influences how others perceive the environment around them. Independence disrupts group control, not through confrontation, but through the quiet demonstration that a different way of living is possible. The Chosen One does not need to challenge every narrative or argue with every attempt at influence. Their presence alone reveals that self-trust can exist outside the structures that once appeared unbreakable. As this understanding spreads, the Chosen One's independence begins transforming from something unusual into something quietly powerful. It reminds others that true strength does not come from controlling people, but from empowering them to think and act with integrity. Why your strength creates paranoia unfolds when the Chosen One's independence begins producing reactions that reveal more about others than about the Chosen One themselves. At first, people may simply observe from a distance, curious about how someone can operate confidently without relying on the approval structures that guide most social environments. Yet curiosity can gradually transform into unease when the Chosen One continues moving forward without seeking validation or permission. The Chosen One does not appear dependent on alliances, reputation management, or group acceptance. Their decisions emerge from personal clarity rather than negotiation with surrounding opinions. For individuals who rely on influence to maintain control, this kind of self-directed movement becomes deeply unsettling. When people cannot predict or influence someone, anxiety begins to grow because uncertainty challenges the sense of control that many social structures quietly depend on. In environments where people expect others to behave according to shared expectations, unpredictability can feel threatening even when no harm is intended. The Chosen One simply lives according to their principles, yet their independence creates a gap in the patterns that others are used to reading. They do not react strongly to praise, nor do they collapse under criticism. They are capable of stepping away from situations that do not align with their values, even when doing so means leaving the comfort of familiarity behind. This calm self-sufficiency becomes difficult for some individuals to interpret. Those who rely on social leverage to guide behavior suddenly find themselves without the tools they usually use to influence outcomes. The Chosen One's lack of dependency makes others wonder what the Chosen One might do next, because traditional signals that guide social expectations no longer apply. The Chosen One does not compete for approval, does not chase recognition, and does not panic when standing alone. This quiet confidence creates a psychological puzzle for those who are accustomed to controlling outcomes through pressure or persuasion. As uncertainty grows, the minds of those who seek control often begin filling the gaps with speculation. They start analyzing the Chosen One's actions, trying to identify hidden motives or secret strategies. Because they themselves often operate through calculated influence, they assume the Chosen One must be doing the same. Yet what they cannot easily understand is that the Chosen One's independence is not part of a complex manipulation plan. It is simply the result of self-trust developed through experience and reflection. Nevertheless, this difference between perception and reality fuels a growing sense of paranoia. When people cannot identify leverage points, they begin imagining them. They may wonder whether the Chosen One is gathering allies quietly, planning to challenge existing structures, or preparing to reveal something that could disrupt the balance of influence within the environment. These suspicions rarely arise from anything the Chosen One has actually done. Instead, they reflect the fears of those who depend on control to maintain their position. The chosen one's silence or calmness becomes interpreted as strategy rather than stability. Even ordinary decisions may be viewed through a lens of suspicion, because people project their own habits of manipulation onto someone who is simply moving freely. Over time, this paranoia can create tension within the environment. Individual who once felt confident in their influence may begin watching the chosen one closely, hoping to identify weaknesses or intentions that would restore predictability. Some may attempt to provoke reactions, testing whether the chosen one can be drawn into emotional conflict that reveals vulnerability. Yet when the chosen one remains composed and focused on their path, these attempts often fail. The absence of reaction only deepens the confusion of those trying to interpret the chosen one's behavior through the lens of control. What they cannot easily accept is that the chosen one's strength comes from not playing the same game at all. The chosen one does not need to outmaneuver anyone because they are not competing for dominance within the group structure. Their independence places them outside the cycle of influence that generates rivalry and suspicion. Ironically, this freedom intensifies the anxiety of those who remain trapped within that cycle. When someone operates outside the system, it exposes the limits of the system itself. The chosen one, therefore, becomes a living reminder that power built on manipulation is fragile when confronted with genuine self-confidence. For those who seek control, this realization can feel destabilizing. Yet for the chosen one, it confirms the value of the path they have chosen. Their ability to remain grounded in their own clarity protects them from becoming entangled in the fears and suspicions surrounding them. The paranoia that others experience is not something the chosen one needs to solve or confront. It is simply the natural response of systems that rely on control when they encounter someone who cannot be easily controlled. In this way, the chosen one's quiet strength becomes both a challenge and an invitation. It challenges environments built on influence while inviting others to discover the stability that comes from trusting their own integrity rather than depending on the approval of others. The attempts to make the chosen one look weak begins unfolding when the people who once relied on subtle control start realizing that their usual methods are no longer working. When influence fails to move the chosen one, a different strategy often emerges. Instead of attempting to guide or persuade them, some individuals begin trying to reshape how others perceive them. This stage is rarely loud or dramatic at first. It often begins quietly, through small remarks, casual jokes, or subtle suggestions planted in conversations. The goal is not necessarily to confront the chosen one directly, but to slowly create doubt around their strength, their character, or their intentions. In environments where reputation carries significant social weight, shaping perception can become a powerful tool. If someone cannot control the chosen one's actions, they may attempt to control how others interpret those actions. Rumors may appear disguised as concern. Someone might question whether the chosen one's independence is actually arrogance. Others may suggest that operating alone means the chosen one lacks cooperation or humility. These statements are often delivered in ways that appear harmless on the surface, yet they serve a deeper purpose: to reintroduce pressure by weakening the chosen one's credibility within the group. When people hear the same suggestion repeated in different conversations, it can begin influencing how they interpret behavior, even if they never directly witnessed anything negative. The attempts to make the chosen one look weak, therefore, become a strategy aimed at restoring the balance of control that independence disrupted. If the chosen one's image can be reshaped into something questionable or unstable, the group's influence systems regain power. People may hesitate to listen to the chosen one's perspective, or may distance themselves to avoid becoming associated with someone portrayed as difficult. Yet what those initiating these efforts often fail to realize is that such tactics reveal far more about their own insecurity than about the chosen one's character. When a person must weaken someone's reputation in order to maintain influence, it signals that genuine authority is already slipping away. The chosen one, meanwhile, often senses what is happening, even if they do not respond immediately. Their independence allows them to observe these dynamics without becoming trapped within them. Instead of reacting defensively, they recognize that perception-based attacks are a common response when manipulation fails. Because the chosen one's strength comes from internal alignment rather than public approval, the impact of these tactics remains limited. They may feel frustration or disappointment at times, especially when people they once trusted participate in spreading doubt. Yet they also understand that reacting with anger would only feed the narrative others are trying to create. By remaining calm and consistent, the chosen one allows their behavior to speak more clearly than any rumor. Over time, people begin noticing the difference between the accusations circulating in conversations and the reality of the chosen one's conduct. While rumors rely on repetition, integrity relies on consistency. The chosen one continues focusing on their purpose, making decisions based on clarity rather than emotional reaction. As days and weeks pass, the contrast becomes visible. Those who expected the chosen one to collapse under pressure instead see someone who remains composed and self-directed. This stability gradually weakens the credibility of those who attempted to portray them as fragile or unreliable. What was meant to damage their reputation instead begins revealing the motives behind the attack. Observant members of the community may start questioning why certain individuals seem so invested in discrediting someone who simply chooses to live independently.
This moment marks an important shift in the dynamic.
The chosen one does not need to defend themselves aggressively because the truth begins revealing itself through behavior. The attempts to make them look weak eventually expose the insecurity driving those efforts. People begin realizing that strength does not always appear loud or confrontational. Sometimes it appears as quiet consistency, the ability to remain grounded even when others attempt to provoke a reaction. The chosen one's refusal to collapse under pressure becomes a silent demonstration of resilience. In environments where influence once relied on shaping perception, this kind of resilience can be transformative. It reminds people that reputations built on gossip are fragile, while character built on integrity remains stable. The chosen one's independence therefore continues revealing truths about the environment around them. What began as a strategy to weaken their image slowly turns into a mirror reflecting the insecurity within those who initiated the attack. By refusing to engage in the same tactics, the chosen one maintains the very quality others attempted to destroy: authenticity. Their strength remains intact, not because they defeated their critics in argument, but because they never allowed their identity to be defined by the narratives others attempted to create. Why the chosen one cannot be easily controlled becomes clear once the tension surrounding their independence reaches a point where others realize that the usual strategies simply do not work. In many social environments, influence depends on leverage. People learn to guide one another's behavior through praise, criticism, approval, or subtle exclusion. These tools function effectively when individuals depend heavily on belonging to the group for identity and stability. Yet, when the chosen one begins living from a place of internal alignment rather than external validation, those tools lose their power. The chosen one's strength comes from internal alignment rather than external approval. And that alignment creates a foundation that cannot easily be shaken by social pressure. While others may adjust their behavior to maintain acceptance, the chosen one evaluates situations through a deeper lens. They ask whether a decision aligns with truth, integrity, and long-term purpose, rather than whether it will earn immediate approval from others. This difference in perspective transforms the entire dynamic between the chosen one and those attempting to influence them. When someone's choices are guided by personal clarity rather than group consensus, the leverage that once controlled them disappears. The chosen one becomes comfortable standing apart from the crowd if that is what integrity requires. They no longer experience the same fear of disapproval that keeps many people bound to group expectations. Instead of reacting impulsively to criticism or praise, they observe situations carefully and respond with intention. This self-trust removes the leverage that manipulators rely on because it eliminates the emotional hooks that would normally trigger compliance. Without the ability to provoke insecurity or dependence, those attempting control find themselves facing a person whose direction cannot easily be redirected. The chosen one is comfortable making decisions alone, and this independence often surprises people who are accustomed to seeing others negotiate every move through social consensus. When a difficult decision arises, the chosen one does not rush to gather approval from multiple voices before acting. They reflect, evaluate the situation through their own understanding, and move forward according to what feels aligned with their values. This quiet decisiveness communicates something powerful to those around them. It shows that their stability does not rely on the fluctuating opinions of the group. For individuals who depend on influence to maintain authority, this stability can feel deeply unsettling. They are used to guiding outcomes by shaping the emotional environment around them. Yet the chosen one remains grounded, regardless of whether that environment is supportive or hostile. This consistency gradually reveals that control requires cooperation from those being controlled. When someone refuses to participate in the cycle of influence, the entire mechanism begins losing effectiveness. Without emotional dependence, the chosen one becomes extremely difficult to control because they cannot be pushed into reactions that serve someone else's agenda. Attempts to provoke guilt may fall flat because the chosen one recognizes when responsibility is being unfairly assigned. Attempts to manipulate through praise may fail because the chosen one does not chase admiration for validation. Even subtle social pressure loses its force when the chosen one demonstrates that belonging is not their highest priority. Their priority remains alignment with truth, even when that path requires standing apart from the majority. Over time, this resilience creates a quiet respect among those who observe carefully. Some individuals begin realizing that the chosen one's independence is not rebellion or arrogance, but a form of self-mastery. It reflects the courage to remain authentic, even when conformity would be easier. This realization can inspire others to examine their own relationship with approval and influence. They may begin asking themselves whether their choices are guided by genuine conviction or by fear of losing acceptance within the group. In this way, the chosen one's independence becomes more than a personal trait. It becomes a living example of what happens when someone chooses clarity over compliance. Those who once attempted to control the chosen one may struggle to understand this strength because it operates outside the familiar patterns of influence.
Yet the chosen one does not need to explain or defend their independence. Their actions speak clearly through consistency and integrity. As time passes, the environment around them gradually adapts to this reality. People who once attempted manipulation may withdraw when they realize their efforts cannot alter the chosen one's direction. Others may approach with genuine respect, recognizing that true strength lies not in controlling others, but in mastering oneself. Through this process, the chosen one continues walking their path with steady confidence. Their independence remains intact because it was never built on resistance alone. It was built on self-trust, awareness, and the willingness to move forward even when no one else fully understands the journey. The psychological shift. When control fails begins revealing itself quietly but powerfully once the individuals who once attempted to influence the chosen one finally recognize that their methods no longer have any real effect. At first, the realization does not arrive suddenly. It grows gradually through a series of small observations. The chosen one continues moving forward without reacting to pressure, without seeking approval, and without collapsing under criticism. The usual signals that manipulators expect to see simply do not appear. There is no desperate attempt to regain favor, no emotional breakdown triggered by gossip, and no sudden change in direction designed to restore harmony with the group. Instead, the chosen one remains steady. They continue focusing on their path with calm determination, and this calmness becomes the moment when the deeper psychological shift begins inside the minds of those who once believed they could control the situation. When influence fails, the individuals who relied on it must confront something they rarely consider: the possibility that their authority was never as powerful as they believed. Control systems often survive because people assume they are unavoidable. When someone quietly steps outside of those systems and continues thriving, that assumption begins to collapse. The chosen one's independence, therefore, becomes a mirror reflecting a difficult truth back to those who attempted to guide or manipulate them. It shows them that their influence depended on cooperation from others. Without that cooperation, their strategies lose their effectiveness. For some individuals, this realization creates confusion. They begin asking themselves why the chosen one does not react the way others normally do. They may analyze past conversations, replaying moments when they expected compliance, but instead received calm resistance. This process can lead to frustration because the usual explanations no longer apply. The chosen one is not rebelling loudly, not seeking revenge, and not attempting to dominate the situation. They are simply continuing their journey without giving control to anyone else. This quiet strength disrupts the psychological patterns that once gave certain individuals a sense of authority. As the chosen one continues moving forward, the people who attempted control may begin experiencing a deeper internal shift. Their strategies lose effectiveness, and this loss of influence forces them to confront their own motivations. Some may realize that their desire to control the chosen one came from insecurity rather than genuine concern. Others may recognize that they relied on influence to maintain their sense of importance within the group. When the chosen one refuses to participate in that dynamic, the illusion of authority begins fading. The frustration that follows can take different forms depending on the individual. Some people become defensive, insisting that the chosen one's independence is arrogance or rebellion. By framing the situation this way, they attempt to preserve their sense of authority even as their influence weakens. Others may become unusually attentive to the chosen one's actions, searching for signs of weakness that would restore their sense of control. In this stage, the chosen one may notice that their movements are watched more closely than before. Conversations may become more tense or more curious, depending on the personalities involved. Yet the chosen one's calm response continues to disarm these reactions. They do not escalate the conflict or attempt to prove themselves. Instead, they remain focused on their own growth and purpose. This calmness gradually exposes how much energy others invested in trying to shape their behavior.
When that energy produces no result, the psychological balance shifts. Some individuals become obsessed with understanding the chosen one because they cannot accept that someone simply chooses freedom over control. For those accustomed to influence, every behavior must have a strategic motive. They assume the chosen one must be hiding alliances, gathering supporters, or preparing some form of retaliation. Yet in reality, the chosen one is simply living without participating in the same power struggles that dominate the environment around them. This difference between perception and reality fuels the tension that others experience. The chosen one's independence becomes interpreted as mystery or strategy, because those observing cannot imagine operating without hidden agendas. Over time, however, the persistence of the chosen one's behavior begins reshaping how people interpret the situation. When someone continues acting with integrity, even after months or years of pressure, observers start recognizing that the independence they once questioned is genuine. The chosen one is not plotting quietly or waiting for revenge. They are simply living according to principles that do not change depending on the opinions of others. This realization creates another psychological shift within the environment. People who once doubted the chosen one may begin reconsidering their earlier assumptions. They noticed that the chosen one never tried to dominate anyone or manipulate conversations. Instead, they maintained a consistent pattern of self-respect and clarity. This consistency gradually transforms suspicion into respect among those who are willing to observe honestly. At the same time, those who depended most heavily on control often experienced the most difficulty accepting the new reality. Some individuals become restless or anxious because the chosen one's independence disrupts the social hierarchy they once relied on. They may feel as though they have lost influence, even though no one openly challenged them. In truth, the only thing that changed is that one person refused to be guided by their expectations. Yet that single change can transform the entire dynamic of the environment. When others witness someone living freely without negative consequences, they begin questioning whether they too might have more freedom than they once believed. This possibility can be deeply unsettling for those who depend on control to maintain their position. The chosen one's independence therefore becomes a catalyst for reflection throughout the community. Some individuals quietly begin reclaiming their own independence. They start speaking more honestly, setting clearer boundaries, or refusing to participate in gossip and manipulation. These small changes gradually weaken the influence systems that once dominated the environment. What began as one person's decision to trust their own path slowly spreads into a broader awareness that authenticity carries its own power. The chosen one may not even realize how much their example influences others. They simply continue living according to the principles that brought them this far. Yet the impact becomes visible as the environment adapts to their presence. People begin recognizing that true strength does not come from controlling others, but from mastering oneself. The psychological shift that began with frustration gradually transforms into something deeper. The recognition that independence can coexist with integrity and calmness. The chosen one does not need to defeat anyone in order to demonstrate this truth. Their steady presence speaks louder than any confrontation. Through patience and consistency, they reveal that control loses its meaning when someone chooses not to participate in the struggle for power. As the environment continues adjusting to this new reality, the chosen one moves forward without carrying resentment toward those who once attempted to guide their path. They understand that the reactions they encountered were often driven by fear rather than malice. When people depend on influence for security, the presence of genuine independence can feel threatening. Yet the chosen one's journey demonstrates that freedom does not require conflict. It simply requires the courage to remain aligned with truth, even when others expect something different. Over time, this courage reshapes not only the chosen one's life, but also the awareness of those who observe their example. The psychological shift that began with the failure of control ultimately reveals a deeper lesson for everyone involved: that the greatest form of power is not the ability to influence others, but the ability to remain grounded in one's own integrity, regardless of the pressures surrounding them. The psychological shift, when control fails, continues unfolding in ways that many people around the chosen one do not immediately understand. Because when control collapses, it does not simply disappear quietly. It leaves behind a vacuum that forces people to confront their own motivations, insecurities, and assumptions about influence. The moment someone realizes that their pressure no longer works, something subtle but powerful happens inside their mind. They begin reassessing everything they thought they knew about the chosen one. At first, the reaction often appears as irritation or disbelief. The individuals who once expected compliance may tell themselves that the chosen one is simply being stubborn or temporarily rebellious. They may assume that with enough persistence, the old dynamics will return. Yet, as time passes and the chosen one continues moving forward without reacting to those pressures, the situation becomes harder to explain away. The chosen one does not come back seeking approval, does not apologize for independence, and does not attempt to negotiate their freedom in order to restore harmony. Instead, they continue focusing on their purpose with quiet consistency. This consistency begins dissolving the illusion that the chosen one can eventually be pushed back into the same patterns that once governed their behavior. As that illusion fades, frustration begins emerging among those who once relied on control. The strategies that once worked so reliably now feel strangely ineffective. Conversations that were meant to provoke guilt produce no emotional reaction. Attempts to question the chosen one's confidence fail to shake their stability. Even the subtle pressure of group opinion begins losing its force. For people who built their influence around these techniques, the loss of effectiveness can feel like losing an important part of their identity. Influence often creates a sense of power that people grow accustomed to using without realizing how deeply they depend on it. When someone refuses to be influenced, it forces a confrontation with the limits of that power. The chosen one, therefore, becomes a symbol of something those individuals rarely encounter: a person who cannot be guided through manipulation. At this stage, the psychological shift begins deepening in unexpected ways. Some individuals become unusually attentive to the chosen one's movements. They watch closely, hoping to find evidence that independence will eventually collapse. They may analyze small details, searching for moments of weakness or inconsistency that would confirm their belief that no one can remain strong forever. Yet the chosen one's behavior continues revealing something entirely different. Instead of growing defensive or reactive, they become even more centered. Their independence begins appearing less like rebellion and more like clarity. This realization unsettles those who expected the chosen one's confidence to fade with time. For others in the environment, however, the shift produces a different reaction. Observers who were never deeply invested in controlling the chosen one begin noticing the contrast between the chosen one's calm stability and the tension among those who attempted influence. They see that the chosen one is not fighting anyone. They are not trying to dominate the environment or gather followers to challenge existing authority. They are simply living according to their own understanding of truth. This quiet authenticity begins attracting respect from people who value integrity more than control. Gradually, the psychological balance within the environment changes. The chosen one's independence begins reshaping how others interpret strength. In the past, strength may have been associated with authority, influence, or the ability to direct group opinion. Now, another form of strength becomes visible: the ability to remain calm and self-directed even when surrounded by pressure. This new understanding spreads slowly but steadily. Some individuals begin realizing that they, too, have allowed social expectations to guide their choices more than their own convictions. The chosen one's example shows them that independence does not necessarily lead to isolation or failure.
Instead, it can create a sense of clarity and freedom that many people quietly long for, but rarely pursue. As this awareness grows, the frustration among those who once attempted control intensifies. Their strategies lose effectiveness, and the environment they once shaped begins changing around them. People who once followed their cues may begin thinking more independently. Conversations that once revolved around maintaining influence start shifting toward authenticity and personal responsibility. The chosen one does not orchestrate this change. It simply happens as a natural consequence of their presence. Their independence acts like a stone dropped into still water, creating ripples that gradually spread across the entire environment. What began as one person refusing to be controlled evolves into a broader realization that influence based on manipulation cannot survive in the presence of genuine integrity. For the chosen one, this stage of the journey carries an important lesson as well. They begin recognizing that their independence is not only about protecting their own path, it also creates opportunities for others to question the systems that once shaped their thinking. The chosen one does not need to preach or persuade anyone to follow their example. Their behavior already communicates the message clearly. When someone lives with authenticity and calm confidence, others naturally begin wondering what allows that stability to exist. Through this quiet demonstration, the chosen one contributes to a subtle transformation within the environment. The psychological shift that began with failed control gradually becomes a lesson about freedom, integrity, and self-trust. People begin realizing that true influence does not come from controlling others, but from embodying values that inspire reflection. The chosen one's journey therefore moves beyond the original conflict. It becomes a living example of what happens when someone chooses clarity over compliance. Those who once attempted to guide the chosen one's path may still struggle with the loss of control, but the environment around them continues evolving. The chosen one walks forward without needing to prove anything, knowing that the strongest response to manipulation is not confrontation, but unwavering authenticity. In that quiet confidence, the deeper transformation unfolds, reminding everyone who observes it that independence built on truth cannot be easily shaken. Why operating solo is a form of power becomes fully visible once the chosen one has walked long enough outside the expectations that once attempted to shape their behavior. At first, operating alone may have felt like something forced upon them by circumstance. The chosen one may have wondered whether their independence was the result of misunderstandings, broken trust, or simply being different from those around them. Yet as time passes and the dust settles from the conflicts and pressures they endured, a new understanding begins to form. The chosen one starts realizing that the path they once thought was isolation is actually freedom. What once felt like standing alone slowly reveals itself as the ability to move without invisible chains. This realization transforms the entire meaning of operating solo. It is no longer a defensive position or a reaction to rejection. It becomes a conscious choice that reflects clarity and self-mastery. In many environments, people spend enormous amounts of energy maintaining alliances, protecting reputations, and navigating unspoken rules about who must be pleased or avoided. These invisible negotiations consume time, attention, and emotional energy. The chosen one, however, gradually discovers that stepping outside these dynamics allows them to reclaim something far more valuable: focus. When someone operates independently, they are free from the constant need to calculate how their decisions will affect group approval. Instead of asking, "Will this upset someone?" or "Will this damage my standing within the group?" the chosen one begins asking a different question entirely. Is this aligned with truth and purpose? This shift in perspective creates a powerful sense of clarity that many people rarely experience. Decisions become simpler because they are guided by principles rather than politics. Energy that once would have been spent maintaining appearances can now be directed toward growth, creativity, and meaningful work. The chosen one begins noticing how much lighter life feels when decisions are made without the weight of constant negotiation. Operating solo, therefore, becomes a form of personal sovereignty. It allows the chosen one to maintain control over their direction without surrendering their identity to external expectations. For those observing from the outside, this independence may appear mysterious or intimidating. People who are accustomed to group influence often struggle to understand how someone can function without relying on the approval networks they themselves depend on. They may assume that operating alone must be lonely or unsustainable. Yet what they fail to see is that the chosen one's independence creates a different kind of connection. Instead of relationships built on obligation or convenience, the chosen one begins attracting individuals who respect authenticity. These connections may be fewer in number, but they carry a depth that superficial alliances rarely achieve. People who encounter the chosen one's independence often feel a mixture of curiosity and respect because they sense the strength required to live this way. The chosen one does not reject collaboration or friendship. They simply refuse to compromise their integrity in order to maintain them. This distinction becomes one of the greatest sources of their power. When someone knows that their self-worth does not depend on group acceptance, they become extremely difficult to manipulate. Attempts to pressure them through approval or rejection lose their influence. The chosen one can walk away from environments that demand conformity without feeling as though they are losing something essential. This freedom removes the leverage that control systems rely on to maintain power. Those who once attempted to shape the chosen one's behavior begin realizing that they no longer possess the tools necessary to influence them. The chosen one's independence becomes a shield that protects their clarity. Because they are not entangled in alliances or rivalries, they can observe situations with objectivity. They notice patterns others overlook because they are not emotionally invested in protecting a group's narrative. This ability to see clearly allows the chosen one to make decisions that appear unusually insightful or timely. Others may wonder how they predicted a situation or avoided a trap that caught many people by surprise. The answer is often simple. Operating solo gave them the space to observe reality without distortion. While others were busy defending positions within the social structure, the chosen one was quietly studying the structure itself. Over time, this perspective becomes one of their greatest advantages. They move through life with a level of awareness that allows them to adapt quickly and remain grounded even when environments around them become chaotic. Operating solo also strengthens the chosen one's relationship with their own intuition. When someone constantly seeks external validation, their inner voice becomes difficult to hear beneath the noise of competing opinions. The chosen one, however, gradually learns to trust the quiet signals that guide them. This trust develops through experience. Each time they follow their intuition and witness the positive results, their confidence grows.
They begin realizing that clarity often arrives when the mind is not crowded with conflicting expectations. This inner guidance becomes a compass that allows them to navigate situations others find confusing or overwhelming. The chosen one's independence, therefore, becomes more than a social position. It becomes a state of awareness. It allows them to remain centered even when surrounded by pressure or uncertainty. For those who once attempted to weaken them, this stability becomes deeply unsettling. They expected the chosen one to struggle without the support of alliances, yet the opposite appears to be happening. The chosen one becomes more focused, more decisive, and more resilient with time. This transformation reveals a truth that many people overlook. Independence is not weakness, but strength in its purest form. When someone learns to rely on their own clarity, they become capable of moving through life with a confidence that cannot be easily shaken. The chosen one no longer fears being misunderstood or excluded, because their sense of direction does not depend on how others interpret them. This freedom creates an aura of calm authority that others instinctively recognize. Even those who once doubted the chosen one begin acknowledging the stability that accompanies their presence. They see someone who moves with purpose rather than hesitation. Someone who remains composed even when faced with criticism or uncertainty. Operating solo, therefore, becomes a demonstration of inner discipline. It requires the courage to remain authentic when conformity would be easier. Yet the rewards of that courage become increasingly visible as time passes. The chosen one builds a life guided by principles rather than pressure, relationships based on respect rather than obligation, and decisions rooted in clarity rather than fear. What began as a path that appeared lonely ultimately reveals itself as a form of liberation. The chosen one realizes that walking alone does not mean being unsupported by the universe or by truth. It simply means refusing to allow external expectations to dictate the direction of their journey. Through this realization, operating solo transforms from a defensive stance into a powerful expression of self-mastery. The chosen one stands as living evidence that a person who trusts their own integrity can move through the world with a freedom that no system of control can easily contain. Why operating solo is a form of power continues revealing deeper layers once the chosen one fully realizes that their independence is not simply a response to pressure, but a position of true authority over their own life. At first, many chosen ones did not consciously decide to operate alone. Circumstances slowly led them there. Situations of betrayal, manipulation, and misunderstanding pushed them to step back from environments where loyalty was conditional and truth was negotiable. What once felt like forced distance slowly became something else entirely: clarity. Over time, the chosen one begins noticing something remarkable. When they stop depending on the emotional approval of others, a large portion of the noise surrounding their life disappears. They are no longer distracted by the need to constantly explain themselves or justify their direction. Instead, they move with intention. This intentional movement is one of the first signs that operating solo is not isolation, but sovereignty. In many communities, people operate within a web of expectations that shape almost every decision they make. Choices are filtered through the lens of how they will affect relationships, reputation, or acceptance within the group. While this system creates a sense of belonging, it also quietly limits personal freedom. People begin editing their thoughts, softening their opinions, or adjusting their behavior to avoid tension. The chosen one, however, eventually discovers that freedom begins where these silent negotiations end. Operating solo allows them to make decisions based purely on alignment rather than social approval. Instead of asking whether others will support a decision, they ask whether the decision reflects their purpose and integrity. This shift in thinking transforms the entire rhythm of their life. They become more decisive because they are no longer trying to satisfy multiple expectations at once. Energy that once went toward managing perceptions becomes available for growth, creativity, and meaningful work. The chosen one suddenly realizes that many people are not exhausted by life itself, but by the constant effort required to maintain approval within complex social structures. When those structures lose their influence, the mind becomes quieter and the path forward becomes clearer. Another reason operating solo becomes a form of power lies in the freedom it creates from emotional leverage. Influence systems function by attaching emotional consequences to disobedience. Someone who challenges expectations may face criticism, exclusion, or reputation damage. These consequences keep most individuals within the boundaries of the group. Yet, the chosen one's independence removes that leverage. When a person has already accepted the possibility of standing alone, threats of exclusion lose their power. Attempts to shame or pressure them into compliance become ineffective because their identity no longer depends on belonging to that system. This freedom can be unsettling to those who once relied on influence. They may interpret the chosen one's independence as arrogance or rebellion, simply because they cannot imagine operating without the same pressures guiding their own behavior. Yet, the chosen one knows that independence does not mean hostility toward others. It simply means refusing to surrender clarity in exchange for acceptance. Over time, this independence also sharpens the chosen one's awareness of the environments they move through. Because they are not emotionally entangled in alliances or rivalries, they can observe situations more objectively. They begin noticing patterns that others miss. They see how narratives are shaped within groups, how influence spreads through conversations, and how certain individuals attempt to guide the direction of collective opinion. This perspective gives the chosen one an unusual advantage. While others react emotionally to social dynamics, the chosen one studies them quietly. They learn which situations require engagement and which ones are better left alone. This ability to step back and observe becomes one of their greatest strengths. It allows them to avoid conflicts that would drain their energy, while focusing on opportunities aligned with their purpose. Another powerful aspect of operating solo is the development of inner authority. When someone constantly consults others before making decisions, their confidence remains fragile because it depends on external confirmation. The chosen one gradually replaces this dependency with something stronger. They learn to evaluate situations through reflection, experience, and intuition. Each decision made independently strengthens their trust in their own judgment. Over time, this trust becomes a quiet source of stability. The chosen one does not panic when faced with uncertainty because they know they possess the ability to navigate challenges without relying on constant guidance. This confidence is not loud or aggressive. It appears as calm certainty. People who encounter the chosen one often sense this quality immediately, even if they cannot explain it. It feels like being in the presence of someone who does not need to prove their worth because they already know their direction. This calm authority often attracts attention from unexpected places. Individuals who value authenticity begin recognizing the chosen one's strength. Leaders, mentors, and collaborators may approach them not because the chosen one sought influence, but because their independence demonstrates reliability. Someone who can think and act independently becomes a valuable ally in environments where creativity and clarity are needed. The chosen one, therefore, begins attracting opportunities that do not rely on manipulation or competition. Their reputation grows not through self-promotion, but through the consistent demonstration of integrity. What once appeared as isolation gradually becomes recognized as leadership. People start realizing that the chosen one's independence was never weakness. It was preparation. By learning to walk without constant support, they developed resilience that many others lack. They became comfortable with uncertainty, skilled at observation, and disciplined in their decisions. These qualities form the foundation of real influence. Unlike authority that depends on controlling others, the chosen one's influence grows from authenticity. People trust them because their actions match their values. Operating solo, therefore, becomes a quiet form of power that reshapes how others perceive strength. It shows that leadership does not always emerge from the center of a group. Sometimes it emerges from the edges, where someone has the courage to remain truthful even when that truth is unpopular. The chosen one stands as living proof that independence does not isolate a person from meaningful connection. Instead, it filters out relationships built on convenience and attracts those grounded in respect and sincerity. As this realization deepens, the chosen one no longer questions whether walking alone was the right path. They understand that solitude was never the destination, but the training ground. It taught them how to trust themselves, how to observe clearly, and how to move through the world without surrendering their identity. In the end, operating solo becomes the very reason they cannot be easily shaken. It gives them the freedom to remain aligned with truth, no matter how much pressure surrounds them. And that freedom is the kind of power that makes those who rely on control deeply uncomfortable. Strength they cannot control brings the entire journey into focus by reminding the listener that the very independence others once tried to criticize is the same quality that ultimately protects the chosen one's power. Throughout the story, many attempts were made to pressure, question, or reshape the chosen one's path. People who relied on influence, alliances, or subtle manipulation believed that operating alone would eventually weaken the chosen one. They expected isolation to produce insecurity and independence to collapse under pressure. Yet the opposite quietly unfolded. Instead of becoming weaker, the chosen one became clearer, calmer, and more focused with time. The conclusion, therefore, reveals an important truth. Strength that comes from inner alignment cannot easily be controlled by external forces. When a person learns to trust their own clarity, the tools of manipulation lose their effectiveness. The chosen one no longer reacts to every rumor, criticism, or attempt to provoke a response. Instead, they move forward with a quiet confidence that does not depend on the approval of the crowd. This confidence unsettles those who once expected them to seek validation. It shows that the chosen one's direction was never determined by the opinions surrounding them. Their path was guided by purpose, discipline, and a willingness to remain authentic, even when standing alone felt difficult. As the dust settles, people begin seeing the difference between influence built on pressure and strength built on integrity. The chosen one does not need to prove anything to the environment that once doubted them. Their consistency has already revealed the truth. The calm presence they carry becomes evidence that independence can coexist with wisdom, humility, and purpose. Final message. The reason some people needed the chosen one to appear weak is because independence cannot be manipulated. But the chosen one has already learned the most powerful lesson of all, that true strength is not the ability to control others, but the ability to remain aligned with truth even when no one else understands the path you are walking.